Now that we have talked about properties of kites and trapezoids, we're going to go ahead and use those properties in order to write equations and solve for missing variables. So you have your checklist, and you can use this to make sure that you are finding the correct properties for each shape. So if we want to find y, I know that my diagonals are perpendicular. Anytime I know that I have diagonals that are perpendicular, that means that I'm dealing with things that are 90 degrees. So all of these angles are 90 degrees, which means that y is equal to 90 degrees. Here I want to find z. I know that opposite angles are congruent. So since this angle down here is 110 degrees, this one must also be 110 degrees. For my kite, I know that I have two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So these two sides are congruent, these two sides are congruent. So y equals 5 and z equals 9. For my isosceles trapezoid, I have AC, which is this length here, represented by 9x minus 2. And I have BD, which is this length here, represented by 4x minus 12. And I can then go ahead and set those equal. And I can solve. So I'm going to subtract 4x and add 2. So I end up with 5x equals negative 10. And when I divide both sides by 5, x equals negative 2. I also know that I have congruent legs and congruent base angles. So this angle is congruent to this angle. And I know that these legs are congruent. So when I'm looking to find y, that's going to be 10. The 8 and the 14 don't tell me anything. It's just the it's just the legs that are congruent, not the 8 or the 14. And then I will take my 5x plus 75 equals to 3x plus 25 and find the measure of my missing base angle. So I'll start by subtracting 3x and then subtract 75. So I get 2x equals negative 50. When I divide by 2, x equals negative 25. So knowing that this is a kite, which property do I see here? I have exactly one pair of opposite angles congruent. So this angle is congruent to this angle. So that's going to be 111 equals 11x minus 10. And then I can go ahead and solve. So I'm going to add 10. And I get 121 equals 11x. I divide by 11, x equals 11. For my isosceles trapezoid, I know that the base angles are congruent. So this angle is congruent to the 80 degrees, and this angle is congruent to the 100 degrees. So since I know that my base angles are congruent, I will set those equal. 4x minus 20 equals 100, and then go ahead and solve. So I can add 20, and I get 4x equals 120. Divide by 4, so x equals 30. And then finally, I'm looking to find a few pieces of information here. So in order to find x, I would know, or I'm looking at sides, but the only thing I know about my sides is that I have that my legs are congruent. And the legs being congruent helps me find y. So here, y equals 7. And I actually do not have enough information in order to be able to find x, so this one is not possible. This won't happen very often, but it's important to note that we don't know anything about x and its relationship to other sides. So we would just say that it's not possible. And then length BD, that is this length right here. So in order to find that, I'm going to use the fact that I have that my diagonals are congruent. So I will say that I know that AC, the whole length is 17. So that means that for BD, the whole length must also be 17. And that is how I find the missing values for my isosceles trapezoid.